I'm Neil Grover, Grover Pro Percussion, here with Casey Cangelosi, composer, performer, teacher. Casey, I think the first time I met you, well, you were a student at Boston Conservatory
That sounds
studying.
right.
Yeah. And one of the teachers there, Pat, had told me you were doing some really, really creative things. And Pat's a creative guy, so if he's saying that, I know it must be something interesting. And tell me a little bit about how you got into being such a creative person. Were you always interested in composing?
Well, first, yeah, thanks so much. That's real nice of you, and thanks for being here. And yeah, it's so nice of Pat to see that way back when Boston Conservatory, when most of the students that I feel like his track really was the strict orchestral folks, and he was just happy to embrace someone who wasn't that way. And I guess I've been lucky; all my teachers have been that way. So, yeah, and actually, a colleague said to me recently in one of those kind of long philosophical conversations we have with colleagues sometimes about, like, are we teaching creativity enough, and are we teaching creativity young enough, and how can we teach creativity more? And I really don't think anyone knows that answer, because on one hand, you see like right now there's this big SpaceX project to send a bunch of artists to orbit around the moon, and the idea is, oh, they'll see the moon and they'll get all these cool creative ideas and they'll build art built around the moon. And one of the pitches that one of the funders, or the funder, says is, what if Picasso had seen the moon up that close? Imagine what he would have created. And I think, like, but maybe your imagination, like maybe lack of seeing things, is what brings out that creativity in you. Like we hear from artists that say exactly that. George R.R. Martin, the author of Game of Thrones, he says, I was restricted to my little apartment growing up in the Bronx or Manhattan, I forget, and I was restricted to my little neighborhood, and that meant my imagination could really flourish. So I don't think we really know how that works, so that's all I can really say when I get in those conversations. But I will say, I've had a lot of people just being really encouraging, of course, people like Pat, people like Nancy there in Boston, Keith Aleo, Sam Solomon there in Boston. I mean, when you brought me on as an artist and said, I like the creative stuff you're doing, do more creative stuff with my products. I mean, I think I've just been very lucky to be in a nice current of encouragement. And as far as I can tell, that's about all we can do.
Well, I think that's what's so cool about artistry. Unlike, working in a factory, every artist is different. Everybody brings different things to the table and processes things differently, and then kind of absorbs and creates their own person, who they are. It's interesting you said something about creativity, because I remember hearing Aaron Copland speak, and he said when the time he wrote Rodeo, which is one of the quintessential orchestral Western pieces, he had never been outside of New York City.
Yeah.
So I think you're right. I think it's the imagination. And one thing that concerns me today, with people being busy all the time, I think you need downtime, just to let your mind wander and let creativity seep in. And I worry about children today having too many activities all the time and not being able to lie outside on the grass looking at the clouds, picking their nose, and being creative.
Yeah, I think you're right. And it seems like the holes in our exposure are perhaps just as important as the exposure itself. Because I definitely know people who I think have been treated to, I mean, actually, a lot of the people I met while I was studying there in Boston, they went to like Juilliard Preparatory Academy, and they had a private teacher coming into their high school because they had this, really well-funded arts program in their high school, and like couldn't have been more privileged. But then when it came to doing something a little outside the box, seemed like the box was just not there,
Right. There wasn't enough space in that box.
Maybe that's it. Yeah, maybe that's it. And I think, speaking of me specifically, I feel very lucky that I went to Utah State University, which was a program, you've never really heard of for music. And it was one that ed degree, performance degree, music therapy degree, oddly enough, and didn't have a established composition program. I think we did technically have that, but there was, one major or something.
Yeah.
It was very, very, so I don't know. I feel like if I had gone to a big program with a respected performance program as well as composition program, I wouldn't have been so encouraged to blend them. Like, it just seemed natural to blend them. And I thought, well, certainly everybody composes. Isn't that what all the composer players did? So why wouldn't I do that,
Yeah, well, I find your career so interesting because I as an entrepreneur myself, I see a great entrepreneurial spirit in what you do, and not only in the music you write, which incorporates elements that are so unique and different to me, like the trinome you used, and the thing with tambourine with the pre-record on the telephone.
Right.
This is exciting to me, and I like it, and I think people sometimes are afraid. They're afraid to go outside the lines, and I think in some ways, the intense orchestral training and everybody's chasing these auditions certainly doesn't encourage anybody to go anywhere outside the lines. And here you are ignoring the lines and creating new lines, expanding it. So I really admire that, and it's really refreshing. What would you say to young percussionists today who look up to you? And this is because I know a lot of young percussionists. I always ask them, what do you want to do? And lately I'm hearing, I want to be like Casey Cangelosi and compose and teach and play. I mean, years ago, everybody wanted to be in an orchestra. But, today it's changed. And I think you've set the bar pretty high in a good way. So what would you say to a young percussionist who really wants to kind of find their own way?
Yeah, well, thanks again. And man, that's where this gets kind of serious, because now what you say matters. And it's like when we're just talking about me and you, it's like, well, we can think and do and say kind of whatever we want, and the only people in harm's way are ourselves. So,
right.
And I'll also add just to what you were saying, it's so nice being a percussionist right now, because I certainly find people who don't like the music I write, but they're not saying, everyone's saying cool, keep doing that. Like, no one is saying what the heck, man, just play the rep, Right. It seems like the spirit in percussion is what you described. It's just exploratory right now, and everyone's very encouraging to new ideas. And of course we need new rep, but to your question, it's tough, because on one hand you want to tell a young person, well, whatever you're compelled to wake up to do is going to be the thing that hopefully you can turn into your thing. But sometimes that thing is, well, I want to get up and drink beer again, and then I want to play snare drum for 10 minutes, and then I want to drink beer again. It's like, well, yeah, that's not going to help you be good at percussion. So sometimes it's a matter of just discipline. And I try to remind them about composing specifically. It's not this, montage of insight, this wonderful feeling that lasts long into the night where you kind of lose yourself. I don't know, that I think TV has maybe taught us about creative people. And if you dig around, I'd say young people dig around and listen to other composers, certainly better composers than myself, talk about this, that they say the same thing. They just say it's a lot of just discipline. It's a lot of work. That little moment of inspiration can be really quick.
Yeah.
And then you have to chase it for a long time after that. And I really equate it to learning an instrument. We practice our instrument for the performance, and I don't know if people practice composing enough.
It's interesting you say that. It's I know from talking with John Williams about his compositional discipline. He writes every day and set at same hours every day, and he goes to his office and he writes. Wow. And it's very disciplined, kind of what you said. And I think people have this Hollywoodized version of, you're going to, all of a sudden this divine intervention comes in and you write a symphony.
Right. Like it comes to you in a dream or something.
Right.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah. No, it's the whole creative process is interesting, and I agree with you. I think in percussion we're going through a very exciting period where people, I think, are just trying to find new ways to use percussion to express themselves.
For sure, for sure.
And I see a lot of electronic and digital stuff coming in, and certainly you've incorporated some outside the norm sounds and techniques, and what really knocked me out is, you're also a great snare drummer. You play everything so great, and you're so creative, and it's really nice and refreshing to see, especially for those of us who have over the years have taught and have sat on juries and hear the same pieces over and over again. At one point, if I heard "Yellow After the Rain" again, I was going to commit suicide because,
Right.
it's everybody was playing. This is years ago, the same thing. So it's nice to have discover new pieces and hear new things.
Well, thanks again. And just back to young people real quick. Something else, a conversation I find myself in is if someone says, I wanna be a composer. I say, great, what have you written? And they say, oh, well, nothing yet. It's like, oh, well, not even like anything? No, nothing. Like, well, then how do you know that's what you want to do? You know what I mean? Like, if you wanted
Right.
to do it, and that's what I meant about you wake up and you do what you're compelled to do, and hopefully you're compelled to do that. And if you're not, I mean, if you're in the state that I just described, like, well, I want to compose, I haven't done it yet, you can learn that impulse. You can build that impulse into your routine and into your environment, but it really just has to become an itch.
Right.
That's the best, and I'm sure you can absolutely relate to it, and we could probably go down this same rabbit hole with your creating of instruments. I mean,
It's the same thing. It's just a different medium. I mean,
Exactly.
I think of myself, I might be painting with oils and you're painting with watercolors.
Exactly.
We're both still painting.
Right, and I imagine if or maybe there was a time at least where if you weren't sketching or you weren't working on something, you just felt kind of like you just had this like itch in your body.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I'll give you an example. Today, when I should have been doing actually my real work in my office, I was back in the shop experimenting with some new type of felt,
Right,
and treating it with different chemicals, and I should have been actually working, but I actually was doing what I love doing.
Stephen Stuckey has a nice little quote in one of the lectures he gave, and it's on YouTube. You can look up Stephen Stuckey lecture, and he says something along the lines of, even at the top of the composition field, there's really no glamour in this. The only thing that's gonna really make you do it is that itch.
Yeah.
And that drive. And, I forget, Malcolm Gladwell calls it one thing, and Anders Ericsson, who Malcolm Gladwell's research really comes from, he calls it another thing. And then I think it's Angela Duckworth calls it the grit. And I think that's my favorite.
The grit.
My
I like that.
favorite term, because like you just have to go after it, and it's kind of a nasty relationship, but it's also one that you just like have to you have to have.
I've heard it referred to as you get the bug.
The bug
is something. It's like a compulsion to do something.
Exactly.
Absolutely. So if somebody asked you, taking your typical month and breaking it into a pie chart, what percentage of time would you devote, saying, to teaching versus performing versus composing?
Oh, geez. There is probably a real answer to that, and it'd be easy to figure out, but I'm just not prepared for it.
Well,
but
just a guess.
Yeah, sure. I think when the year's going, it's probably, geez. I mean, like my teaching schedule. I mean, if you go through my teaching schedule, I've got 10 hours of private students, and I've got 6 hours of ensemble, and I'm not there every minute of that ensemble time. But yeah, so I mean, if you want to call that, let's call it 12 hours to be safe, and one of those is studio class, and 2 of them are our class called Freshman Techniques, but I'm only there for 1 of them. So I don't know. Yeah, let's say 12 or 13 hours. And then, geez, a good chunk of your life goes to email and just keeping up with all of that. And I mean, the truth is the amount that we practice now is just not what it used to be. And I guess that's okay. It's kind of sad because there is that itch to do that. That's becoming less and less. But then again, when we were students and we were in our master program practicing 6 hours, 8 hours a day, you also told yourself like, yeah, you can't do this for the rest of your
Right.
life.
There was a goal. There was an end game.
Yeah, so it's you miss it in a way, but yeah, I would say I do get to practice every day a little bit, and then when I have chunks of time, I practice real good and I practice well, and it could certainly be
Well, I'm
more.
more interested in terms of how much of your composing, how much of your creative self, how much time you can carve out for that.
Yeah, it's really not much, especially now that we have a little 11-month-year-old little boy now. So
Congratulations.
Oh, thanks. It's certainly less, but yeah, I think back to kind of how I was describing composition. The ideas come and they're very quick, and then it's just a matter of committing it to paper and planning it out, and that I find I'm able to do because I'm not a measure by measure person. I'm a have the big idea, and then it's very easy to chip away at it because you kind of know the whole plan, you know where it's going to go, and sometimes the plan is very simple, like the piece I wrote with your beautiful synthetic head tambourine, the black.
Yeah, that's a cool piece.
That's a cool tambourine. I was so happy how that turned out and how that sounds, and I've taken that all over the world. I took it to Spain with me just recently, and do that. Anyway, but yeah, like having the big picture plan for the piece, it's not like, oh, I necessarily have this super detailed form or real mathematically solid form that everything's going to follow. I mean, sometimes it's just as simple as, no, I really can see what this is going to convey and what the energy of the piece is going to be and how long it's going to be. And once at least that's in place, yeah, you can chip away, even with like, okay, I found 10 minutes in between lessons. I can pick up that tambourine, or I can pick up a pen and paper, and I can actually get some work done.
Absolutely, absolutely. If I asked you to tell me what would I find on your iPad or your phone in iTunes, that would surprise me.
That would surprise you?
What music would I like see in there? I can't believe you're listening to this. Is there anything?
Oh yeah, you'd find the new Hate Eternal album. It's just like super heavy metal. With crazy drummers and crazy guitar players.
Cool.
Yeah, that's probably the latest.
And do you play drum set?
Yeah, drum set was really the first love. It's not something that I was able to keep on the same track and energy that it started from. But yeah, I'm a classical percussion teacher, but there's a drum set in my office. And
did you start on drums or?
Yeah, I was born in '82 in a kind of modest income household, which meant there was MTV on at all times with older teenage siblings. So it was it was MTV all the time back when there was actually music on MTV.
Yeah.
And
do
so,
any other family members musicians or play instruments or?
No, my father, actually, my dad is so interesting because he found this new love for a dobro. And he played guitar a little bit when he was much younger, but he injured his hand. He had this atrophy in his hand, which was really, really bad for him because he needs to type on his keyboard. He's a math professor at Utah State. And but yeah, in the last 5 or 6 years, he just found this new love for this little instrument called the dobro, which
it's a great instrument.
Yeah. Maybe some listeners might not know. It's basically a slide guitar. It's a type of slide guitar, but it's really helped his hand kind of come back, and he writes this music and records this music, and it's he'll tell you, it's really, really bad, but it's really gotten good, and he just really, really likes it. So but when I was younger, he did some, and then my parents offered piano lessons. My sisters took piano lessons for a few years, and I think I was just a bad kid. I did one piano lesson and then stopped. I was probably too young, but drum lessons stuck. So
it sounds like there was always music though around.
Yeah,
hearing
there was
music.
Yeah.
I think that's so key. I think because I always had music that since I can remember as a little kid, always in our house, and I think hearing it even though you might not be studying or playing an instrument, just hearing it, I think develops the ear at an
I would
early
think so.
age. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine it wouldn't, or at least it develops your instinct. I know when I talk to students and, the phrasing is wrong or they're just not selling this piece or this passage, it's so hard to prescribe what to instinctually do. You can tell them crescendo here, diminuendo there, but you've had that student that they have a diminuendo and a retardando leading to a cadence, and the pacing is just weird, or it's like they suddenly slow down, they don't know how to pace it right, and you're just like, yeah, okay, well, you need to do it more gradually, and you tell them exactly what to do, but you also at the same time just wonder, like, no, that's just not how we hear.
Right. I used to, when as a student, I got a student who was having trouble with a transition like that, especially an accelerando or the accelerando. I would keep a tennis ball in my office, and I'd make them stop, and I'd throw it up, and it let it bounce to stop. And it's
nice.
naturally accelerating.
That's cool.
I say, listen to this, and try and emulate it. And once they got the emulation, then I said, now you could shape it a little bit. But I wanted them to grasp a natural type of accelerando using gravity in some way.
Oh, I love that. I think I'll have to steal that to demonstrate the pacing.
Yeah.
Because imagine you drop the tennis ball and then you tell the student, imagine, you can see how many times it's going to bounce, and there's a natural way we're used to seeing that. But what if we took away 10 of the bounces? You skipped.
Right.
The ball wouldn't do that. You got
right. I kind of got that idea from Fred Hinger, but he used to use a tennis ball to teach timpani touch tone. So he'd have the students bounce the ball like this to develop that kind of, that touch.
That flow.
I always thought that was a very cool approach, even though I use that stroke not often in my playing, but I thought it was a really interesting way to demonstrate it. So I started thinking about other ways to use balls and gravity, and because it's so hard to explain sometimes. You could play it as a teacher, but sometimes it's easier to demonstrate. Just let go of a ball and say, watch this.
It's very hard to stick with that for very long, because I find I tell them, look, it's not all arm, it's not all wrist, it's this.
Yeah.
And you do a few exercises, you do like some early Goodman exercises.
Right.
And there's only a few pages of those, and then it goes on. As soon as the music gets harder, those bad habits come back in.
Right.
And suddenly they're wrist only or they're arm only. And I don't know, I feel like there's a pressure to keep it fun, to keep it stimulating, to keep it interesting, and to keep them motivated. But maybe we just got to go back to that the tennis ball Hinger.
Well, I remember once
doing
rehearsing Oiseau Exotique, and it wasn't going as and Messiaen was there, and he wasn't happy.
Oh, geez.
He stopped the rehearsal. This was in Tanglewood, and he made the whole orchestra sit there and listen, and there were birds in the rafters chirping out because we're in the shed outside. Sat there for about 20 minutes just listening to birds, and then resumed the rehearsal, and it was much better.
Really?
He was much happier. Oh yeah, because he didn't think we weren't getting it. It was everybody was counting and too worried about accuracy and things like that, and he wanted us to listen to the birds and pay attention and try and be bird-like.
What were you playing?
I wasn't playing xylophone, thank goodness.
Or bells, jeez.
I think I was playing bells, actually.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, it was tough. That was a hard part.
I've only done the gongs.
Yeah,
which was still
actually, I did the gongs with Pat. The two of us were playing them once. But yeah, it was a long time ago, and but I'll never forget that, because we were all, at first we thought he was crazy. Right. He's stopping rehearsal. We have limited rehearsal. Wants to sit there listening to birds, but it made a lot of sense.
Wow, that's really cool. That's
cool. So
cool.
what's coming up? What's new and exciting? Do you have anything you're working on now?
I'm writing some music for my wife and I to finally play. My hope is to have a few pieces done this summer for us to work up and record.
What does she play?
So she's a percussionist.
Oh, great.
And she studied in Boston too. She was another
really?
Boston Conservatory student.
Great.
Yeah, after I was there, so we didn't overlap there. We overlapped elsewhere, but great pianist and percussionist.
Mm-hmm.
And she's got the Nancy marimba degree, so
okay.
Yeah, she teaches with me here at JMU.
Oh great. And what's her name?
Laurel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Laurel Black. And let's see, I've got a commission to finish for, and the steel pan all-star Liam Teague. I don't know if you know
Oh
Liam.
yeah, oh yeah. I mean, I don't know him personally. I know his work's great.
Oh yeah, he's man. Yeah, I couldn't be more terrified to write a piece for someone. I mean, he's the nicest guy in the world, and he can play anything. So that's not why I'm scared. But everything I
That
write,
always seemed like a strange instrument to learn to me, just the way the notes are laid out, and having it not being standardized and
yeah,
trying to figure it out. I guess I never. When I was going to school, nobody played pan. Only the guys in Trinidad. I
right,
mean, schools didn't have pan programs. They're totally unheard of.
yeah.
Now I hear some great stuff.
Oh yeah. Well, and that's why it's so difficult. It's just I don't know Pan, and
Right.
we've had a few conversations, and one of the reasons he says no, you'd be good for this because you don't know Pan. Like do it, and
Right.
that means you'll bring something different. And it's like, oh man. So anyway, it's
I guess
actually
you won't
very
be writing many glisses then.
right. No glissades. Yeah. Well, it's hard to wrap my head around Pan solo because it's much easier to write when if one of the instruments involved is something you know the idiosyncrasies of and you have a lot of control over. So I don't know much about the violin, but if I was writing something for vibraphone and violin, it would be a lot easier than solo
Right.
violin.
Right.
Yeah, so I feel the same way with solo pan a little bit, but yeah, I'll do that. And Theodore Milkov, we're talking about doing a piece, and it's just I think a matter if I can do the length he wants in time, and that's it. Then I'm working on stuff for my wife and I.
Oh, cool. So when somebody contacts you about a commission,
Mhm.
who decides kind of the instrumentation? How long is that kind of collaborative discussion you have with the person?
Yeah, it's of course it varies, and I would say they're usually saying the instrumentation, and I kind of throw out a number, like how would this sound to you? And if they say, oh man, that's not what I was thinking, because I think people have very different experiences with commissions. Some people have been on these very big consortiums, and they're used to what the big composers will charge. They know what it costs to get the Joseph Schwantner second percussion concerto out there. So, but then there are other folks who they haven't had that experience. They just haven't seen those numbers, and you just don't know who you're talking to sometimes.
Right.
So then again, I guess it comes down to your own opinion of what your time is worth and how much you want to write the piece. And that's usually the big one for me is this one I can really get behind and I'm excited about and I can get an idea for.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, often that's enough, and then it's very easy to make the price very low.
Yeah. No, it sounds like it's something. Once again, you have to use a lot of creativity to come up with a number and what you're going to write for and how long and it's
Yeah.
I've always wondered. I have friends who are painters, and I always ask them, "How do you know when the painting's done?"
Right.
And they have different answers, and I guess it must be the same way. I would imagine as a composer yourself, you may not always know how long it's going to be, or may go in a different direction.
Yeah, I think that's true. And for me, the ending is really there first. It brings me back to a conversation with a friend who says, he said I have no problem starting. Starting is fine. I have a hard time finishing, and I think, well, I have a really hard time starting because I don't know how to start if I don't know kind of the plan. If I don't know what the ending's going to look like. Every note you write is leading to the end.
Right.
So, yeah, and that's often a good sign of a good performance. When the piece is over, you can really feel the piece is over. Because I think we've watched those performances before where you realize after it's happened, the piece is over. It's kind of like, oh, I see, that was the end.
Right. Sometimes I feel, boy, that the composer ran out of ideas. It just never developed. Sometimes that I didn't see if I have trouble identifying form in some way, even just the smallest amount of form, and I start to wonder, is it me or is it the composition? Am I just not hearing it, or
Right.
is it not there?
Or is it the performer too? I think it can be the performer.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of those snare drum etudes we teach and are on all the audition tapes and the summer tapes and everything.
Right.
You know, sometimes it's hard to know right when it ended because the student is just being so literal and so exact and playing everything so straight faced.
Right.
And it's like, man, I just want to see some expression, at least in a real performance, maybe not in a tape or something, but you know, you will know when it's over.
Absolutely. You said something earlier that really resonated with me about having fun. That I think so many today. I went into not long ago. I was working with a high school percussion all-state group, and I'm working with them, and we're playing, and they all looked like they were in pain. And I just stopped them. I said, "Look, do me a favor. Will you please make a mistake or two?" I said, because it's good. I'm not going to yell. It's going to be great, but I want you to have fun.
Right.
And once that they realize that I'm not going to like bite their head off if they make a mistake, everybody relaxed and had a lot of fun. And I think that's missing a lot. I think people are so intense and so worried about making an error. And I said, no, I'd rather swing for the fence. You're going to miss sometimes, but be passionate about it. And
well, and I think there's nothing more fun than, I mean, what were we playing? We were playing one of those Bob Becker pieces with the JMU group here, and my doctoral student Caleb's playing the snare drum solo, Newthan, or I forget what those pieces are called, but it was one of those. And you know, he had something where he's repeating the same lick for this long stretch, and he's the soloist and he's killing it. And he just got totally lost, and he just smiled and looked at his fellow student there, Lucas, and Lucas like smiled back while he was playing, and they just knew right there, like, oh, Caleb's totally lost. Okay, great. I'm gonna cue him back when we're at this certain spot. And they like, I don't know, there's just like so much joy in that little mistake.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know. I feel like you have to experience that once or twice, and then you're more sold on the idea of like, oh, maybe it's not always about like no perfect, you know.
Absolutely. Well, it's funny. I heard a story recently about a very famous jazz musician, and somebody heard him play a piece and wanted to record it, and they got to the recording session, and the jazz player plays it, of course, differently than he played it in the club, and the producer says, no, play it the way you played it the other night. Let's do it again. And he played it again, and it was different even the third time. And it went on. Finally, the producer realized he's not going to play it exactly the same way twice.
Right.
Because that's not what jazz musicians do.
It's not what he does. Yeah.
So it's okay. It's okay. And I remember having a jazz teacher once saying, jazz is no wrong notes, just better choices than others. So
right.
They're all leading somewhere or coming from somewhere else. And even if you hit a quote clam, if you could resolve it some way, then you'll undo that as a mistake. It just works.
Our new conductor here, Foster Byers, is just wonderful. Our new wonderful orchestra conductor. We were putting together a little faculty ensemble of Song of the Earth, the Mahler, the Schoenberg arrangement. Yeah, or Song to the Earth. There's a chamber version arranged by Schoenberg, and some days this one part would be in a fast 4, then other days it would be in 2. So my friend Eric Genovan is the composition faculty and percussionist here. It didn't bother us at all. We were fine. It's just but sometimes he would get asked like, "Will you be in 2? Or will you be in 4 there?" And I loved his answer. It was, well, we should be about here. I might go into 4. It's like just it's okay. Just you can be flexible.
Right.
And I just like that he
yeah. Well,
if
he's in 4, it's going to be roughly twice as fast as beating as it would be in 2. And if
right, it's going to be.
You should sense that. Yeah.
It's going to be close, but he's also just like not. His goal isn't to have a set, consistent thing.
Right,
his goal is to chase the moment.
Right.
And that could be maybe the 4 beat and the halftime. It's going to end up being the same tempo, but he's just saying, I'm going to chase the feeling, you know?
Yeah. Well, in the same way, uh, I hear jazz musicians playing, and they'll go into double time, but they never prearrange it. They don't say in bar 672, let's go into double time.
Right.
It just happens,
Yeah.
you know. But they all feel it, and they go, and then they come out of it.
Yeah.
There's something nice about that spontaneity, and that it's magical.
Yeah, of course.
Oh, well, Casey, I don't want to keep you all night. You have a young child. Is there anything kind of you want to say, or you'd like to add to the conversation that maybe, you know, people should hear or would like to hear?
Oh, no, I think those were really great questions, and I don't know, it's nice that we can even do this and that people will listen, and thanks to you so much for having me as a Grover artist. And
it's my pleasure. Well,
having this chat.
This is great, and I really appreciate you making time. And if somebody wants to contact you, can they contact you through the website, your website?
Yeah, there's an email listed there, or Facebook. I'm usually faster on Facebook if they want to contact. I just discovered this little thing called message requests. So if someone who's not your friend messages you, it'll go to message requests. So I'm still catching up on those, but I'll now see them all and all that good stuff. And I should say, man, I'm sorry I screwed up the Facebook Live thing the other day.
No. This is fine. This is fine. It's you know, actually, I think this is going to work out better. And thank you for showing me how to do this with Skype. I'm kind of a newbie to a lot of this, but I have to say, everybody in my age bracket, I'm doing better than all my colleagues from a technology standpoint. Most of them can't even use a smartphone. Well, Casey, thanks a lot. Listen, happy holidays and a happy, healthy start to the new year. And thanks so much. I appreciate it.
You too, Neil. Yeah, great to see you as always.
Okay, great. Thanks.
All right. Take it easy.
Bye-bye.